What is meant by invisibility? It is certainly no secret that North America, or Turtle Island, a common indigenous name for the continent, particularly among the Algonquin and Iroquois nations, was settled by indigenous peoples many millennia before European settlers arrived. But mainstream, read white, U.S. society has often refused to see this. Often, Native Americans have been treated as vestiges of the past, not living people today. And even when looking at the past, the historical account is regularly distorted. The violence of genocide, including the seizure of an estimated 1.5 billion acres, over 2.3 million square miles, of land and forcible relocation of people onto reservations is downplayed, if not denied altogether. The so-called Indian boarding schools, which explicitly sought to separate Native children not just from their parents but their culture, "Kill the Indian, save the man" was the refrain of Colonel Richard Henry Pratt, founder of one of the most famous of these schools in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, are also typically ignored. Instead, often what passes for history are warmed-over myths, such as Thanksgiving narratives that offer, as Lower Brule Sioux member Jordan Daniel kindly puts it, a very romanticized, whitewashed education, or Hollywood westerns that have regularly employed the dual stereotype of the noble Indian and the bloodthirsty savage. Meanwhile, millions of Native Americans today often remain unacknowledged. As a social studies teacher said to an Education Week reporter in a segment broadcast by PBS NewsHour a few years ago, "When you tell students that Native people are still here in America, they're like, 'Oh, we didn't know that.'" Challenging invisibility in philanthropy. This invisibility has major consequences throughout U.S. society. This volume does not purport to cover all aspects of this, but it does make a valuable contribution in showing how Native nonprofit institutions and Native nonprofit leaders are actively challenging that invisibility in the philanthropic world. Nationally, in the United States in 2021, total philanthropic giving totaled $484.85 billion. In terms of assets, that year foundation assets exceeded $1.3 trillion. There are, in short, considerable resources that could make a significant difference if philanthropy adequately resourced the obvious leadership emerging from Native communities. Unfortunately, far too many in the philanthropic world have failed to step up for Native communities. For example, a 2020 study produced by Native Americans in Philanthropy and Candid, a leading nonprofit sector research firm, noted that while 2.9% of Americans are indigenous, between 2002 and 2016, only 0.4% of foundation grant dollars served Native Americans. A more recent survey conducted in the spring of 2021 by the Center for Effective Philanthropy, CEP, found that even though Native communities experienced greater levels of economic stress and the highest rates of infection and death from the COVID-19 pandemic, only 11% of 256 surveyed foundations made significant funding commitments during 2020 and 2021 to Native-serving nonprofits. The CEP research team correspondingly titled the report that resulted from their survey, "Overlooked." Moreover, if one looks at funding for not just Native-serving but also Native-led organizations, then the level of philanthropic support is even more limited.